Hello and welcome. This is the Zen community of Oregon, making the teachings of the Buddha Dharma accessible to support your practice. New episodes air every week.
The Ancestors' Great Mirror. Unmen taught, everyone has a light. Everyone has a light inside. When you're looking for it, you can't see. When you're looking for it, you can't see. It's dark, dark, hidden. When you're looking for it, you can't see. It's dark, dark, hidden. What is this light that everybody has? What is this light that everybody has? He himself answered, the kitchen pantry, the entrance gate. Then he said, it's better to have nothing than something good. It's better to have nothing than something good. It's a good line to bring into your zazen during sesshin. But I want the good thing. What is this light that everybody has? What is the ancestors' light? We try to look for it and we don't see. It's dark, dark, hidden. This koan, again, has to do with intimacy. Zazen is a practice of walking further and further into the dark. We're so used to encountering life head on through our intellect, through our thoughts, through, as Dogen Zenji says, our ideas and views. So Dogen instructs, therefore, put aside the intellectual practice of investigating words and chasing phrases. Therefore, put aside the intellectual practice of investigating words and chasing phrases. There are so many thoughts we can chase during sesshin. Even the mind can be tricky and be like, but this is a Dharma thought. Can think these thoughts, but it's still thinking. And when we're still entertaining thought, we're still in the mind and realm of thought. And the Dharma is continuously pointing us to the mind beyond thought. So Dogen says, learn to take the backward step. Learn to take the backward step. You could say the backward step into the dark, to not knowing. Instead of being head first into whatever practice you're doing, backward step, like stepping back into the practice. Learn to take the backward step that turns the light and shines it inward. To move beyond thinking. To orient our heart mind, our attention beyond thinking. Is to step deeper into the dark, the hidden, the mystery of being, the mystery. And we're taking this backward step out of identification with our thoughts, with our ideas, with our views. It is possible to regard thought as just another sense experience. As Gensho said yesterday, what is beyond thinking? Everything else. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, awareness through the senses. And we're using this word intimate because awareness through the senses is infinitely intimate. It's infinitely intimate. A teacher said to me once during sesshin, there's always more intimacy. There's always deeper intimacy. I loved this analogy Gensho used yesterday of intimacy in our practice, comparing it to intimacy in a relationship or a friendship. And, part of what he said is we can't really get to know someone when we're just talking about ourselves. It doesn't quite work. We know ourselves pretty well-ish. We can't really get to know someone when we're preparing what we're going to say next, or when we're only halfway paying attention. That's so true with our zazen, with our listening practice, with our breathing practice, whatever practice you're doing, with chanting, feeling the body, with walking, with koan practice. We can't really get to know the breath if we're talking about ourselves the whole time, or thinking about the future, or daydreaming, or doing this tricky thing that the mind can do called dual tracking, where I've caught my mind doing this so many times, where we're paying attention to the breath or sound, and meanwhile we're also entertaining a thought kind of right below that. Or I'll notice, I'll get to the bottom of the exhale, and then I'll pick up the thought for the inhale. And then for the exhale, I'll just be exhaling, and then I'll continue, even if I left off in the middle of a sentence. And I would say then, yeah. Intimacy in relationship with other humans, with animals, with the natural world, invites connection, a turning towards, an actual interest in the other being, curiosity. And this can be easy when we're falling in love or we met somebody who's really interesting. And there's just a natural interest in the other person. We want to hear their stories. We want to tell them ours. We want to be in their presence and just feel what that feels like. We savor their attention. And then time goes by, and the mind starts saying, oh gosh, I heard this story already. Why are you telling the same story? And the person, and this can even happen with a place, it becomes predictable. They become predictable in our mind, familiar. And so we tend to shut down a bit. We don't have the same patience, the same curiosity. We stop extending grace. Someone told me recently, I'm most judgmental of myself and those I love most. And this was a heartbreaking discovery she was making. We were working on the precepts, and we were working with the 6th precept, which is, I vow not to gossip about others' faults. And she was just realizing how often she's fault-finding the people that she loves most and herself. Why do we do that? And how does this apply to our practice, right? You can fall in, somebody was saying, when I have a new practice, it's so interesting. But then I get bored. Or the mind says, oh, I know about the breath, or boring breath. Gosh, why won't they move me on to a new practice? Or, another thing that can happen at this point in sesshin is my mind is calm. Now what? What's next? Somebody shared this story before I came to sesshin about a relationship that changed in their life with their partner. And they had been together for 30 years. And they would describe their relationship with them as being like a favorite, well-worn old wool sweater. There's a kind of intimacy there, familiarity, fit just right. But one day, they had a day where they had to leave the house early. They had some errands and a doctor's appointment. And when they finished the errands, they decided to stop at the library downtown before going to their doctor's appointment. They had some extra time. And as they were wandering through the stacks of books, they caught sight of their partner sitting, looking out the window, facing the window and absorbed in a book. And at first they got really excited and were like, oh, wow, I have this extra hour and I could spend it with her. This chance, unexpected meeting. And as they approached her, something struck them. And they said it was like seeing their partner of 30 years for the first time. And this person realized that their partner was a stranger in that moment, a mystery. They didn't actually know them like that wool sweater they thought they knew so well. And they said that moment of seeing them in the library, and they actually didn't go over to them, go over to her. They said that moment changed their relationship completely. A new love emerged for their partner, a love that allowed deeper intimacy and curiosity, because it now included the unknowability of their partner. It was like they had permission to let this person be a mystery, to be the mystery that they are. And this analogy, speaks to the intimacy of Zazen. Of that quote that Bancho shared, not knowing is nearest. Not knowing is nearest. Because when we lead with the head first, or when we think we know, and whatever that is, if we think we know what the breath practice is all about, if we think we know what day 3 of sesshin is all about, if we think we know where we're headed next period of Zazen, if we think we know somebody, a person, we actually stop knowing them. We're just knowing them through our mind, through our filters, through the thoughts that we're putting on top. And we're not actually with the living, breathing experience of this other, of this mysterious other, and even ourselves. We don't actually know ourselves. If we think we know ourselves, if we're like, I am such and such a way, that's just a small slice of who we really are. And that's part of what we're discovering here together. We're discovering the mystery that we are. And it's difficult to do. Mind resists. Thoughts have kept us so safe, so they think. so secure. We've got everything planned. We know the right thing to say at the right time to the right person to get the reaction that we think we want so that we feel safe. We do this in our partnerships, we do this in our friendships, we do this to ourselves. When we allow mystery, when we allow the breath to be unknowable, unpin-downable, when we allow ourselves to rediscover our bodies in this living moment, that's intimacy. Because it truly is a discovery. Perhaps we get so close that our sense of self and other, breath and the one who's aware of the breath, deer and the one who's watching the deer, pain and the one who's aware of pain. Or perhaps those senses of separation start to dissolve. This is a unified life, as Bancho said. The Heart Sutra says, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. Wordless this. One of our chants says, the mind of the great sage of India was intimately transmitted. The light of the ancestors, intimately transmitted. So I'd like to share a story from a collection of stories about the ancestors called The Transmission of the Light. Transmission of Light. It's by Keizan Zenji, who was I think the third ancestor after Dogen Zenji. Sometimes considered the mother of Soto Zen. And this story is the second story in this book of ancestors. So this is the transmission of the light from the Buddha to Mahakashyapa. And we met Mahakashyapa a little bit yesterday in Ratnavati's story. This is a little more rounded out. Kashyapa was many, many things. So here's another side of Kashyapa, Mahakashyapa. The Buddha raised a flower and blinked his eyes. Kashyapa broke out in a smile. The Buddha said, I have the treasury of the eye of truth, the ineffable mind of nirvana. These I entrust to Kashyapa. And then he tells a little bit about Mahakashyapa. Kashyapa was born in a Brahmin family. In Sanskrit, Kashyapa means drinker of light. Drinker of light. When he was born, a golden light filled the room, then went into his mouth. Hence, he was called Kashyapa, drinker of light. His complexion was golden, and he had 30 of the 32 major marks of greatness. Kashyapa met the Buddha at a shrine known as the Shrine of Many Children. The Buddha said, welcome, mendicant. Kashyapa, having already shaved his head and put on a patchwork vestment. Then the Buddha entrusted him with the treasury of the eye of truth. Kashyapa practiced austerities and never wasted any time. Only seeing the ugly emaciation of his body and the wretchedness of his clothing, everyone doubted Kashyapa. So Mahakashyapa is said to have practiced austerities. And because of this, he looked rather disheveled, rather emaciated. And it says that because of this, every time the Buddha was going to give a talk in some place or other, he shared his seat with Kashyapa. He shared his seat with Kashyapa, who was the senior member of the community. Just the kindness of that teacher-student relationship. He shared his seat because the other monks doubted Kashyapa. This is a little more of the story. Before an assembly of 80,000 on Spiritual Mountain, the Buddha raised a flower and blinked his eyes. No one knew his meaning. All remained silent. Then Kashyapa alone broke into a smile. The Buddha said, I have the treasury of the eye of truth, the ineffable mind of nirvana, and the formless teaching of complete illumination. I entrust it all to Kashyapa. I remember hearing Hogen Roshi share that koan once, and the first thing he said after he read the koan was, this koan is about love. That was the first time I ever heard Hogen Roshi say the word love in a Dharma talk. So it struck me. So this is the first story of this transmission of the light from teacher to student. It's called the flower sermon in our lineage. And, in hearing this story, we're also hearing a little bit of Zen. We communicate with flowers and silence and blinks and smiles. What is transmitted? What is shared? Can the Buddha give Mahakashyapa anything? Probably Mahakashyapa was the only one who knew he couldn't. The other monks were like, what did he get? Can I have it too? During this sesshin, we're opening to the transmission of the light of the ancestors, the wondrous mind of nirvana. It doesn't belong to the Buddha, it doesn't belong to Mahakashyapa, it doesn't belong to Dogen Zenji or Ratnavati or anyone else. It's our mind. It's our shared inheritance, whether you practice Buddhism or not. You go outside and the ancestors hold up the forest. Like Buddha held up the flower, they hold up the bamboo or the sky. They point the way through the baby owl or the bird chirps, through peony and lupin, through stone and stump. And here in this room, through the golden light, we are two light drinkers. Open your mouth. Through the cement walls, the bodies breathing and sitting upright. The ancestors are everywhere, constantly teaching, blinking, showing us the way through silence, through simple happiness. Dogen Zenji says, the Zazen I speak of is not meditation practice. It is simply the Dharma gate of joyful ease. Sometimes we think joy is supposed to be loud, exciting, big, passionate. We don't really know if we're happy unless we're laughing uncontrollably or something like that. But in Zazen, we get to open to and know a more subtle expression of joy. People have come to Sesshin and said, there's no joy in Zen. I don't like this. But we're opening to a more subtle form of joy, what Dogen Zenji calls joyful ease, or contentment, or simple happiness. The joy of being. Nothing needs to be happening in particular. Somebody said, I'm feeling joy even though my body hurts. Is that okay? Yeah, isn't that amazing? That we can know the joy of being even when things are a little tumultuous too. And I often ask myself, is it joyful, just to be aware? Just that act or art of awareness. We're practicing during the Sesshin, cultivating a relationship to the ancestors. There's so many ways to open to the support of the ancestors. Ways that allow the ancestors to perhaps intervene in our practice realization. When I first started practicing, I used to imagine opening to my teacher's mind in the Zendo. I had read somewhere two teachers communicating, and one of them, they were writing letters to each other. They lived across the country. There were two of the early ancestors on American soil, and early Zen ancestors. And one of them wrote, I'll see you in Samadhi. And that was so intriguing to me. And so I used to imagine that I could just tune in to chosen Samadhi. I later learned that this is a practice similar to Guru Yoga in the Tibetan tradition, where before you start practicing, you tune into your teacher's mind and the mind of the lineage. And you just imagine them, or imagine the lineage, and you just tune into their samadhi, to their heart mind. So that's part of what we're inviting is creative ways to open to the help of the ancestors. When I started working on koans, I framed a picture of Maizumi Roshi, who's Chosen's teacher, and kept it in my altar in my bedroom, in my dorm room. I was living here. Maizumi Roshi had been through the koans twice. He had two different teachers and went through the koan collections both times with two different teachers. And so I thought he could help me because I was getting stuck. My self-consciousness was keeping me from being able to be intimate with the koans. And what happened, he ended up appearing in a couple of my dreams and giving me teaching. It was very moving. So it's interesting. I didn't know what would happen. It's kind of like that entering of not knowing is most intimate. I didn't have expectations that I was suddenly going to pass all the koans because I was praying to Maizumi Roshi, but it was like I was connecting to the lineage, and then something mysterious happened. And in that gave me more confidence to just show up and make a fool of myself in Sanzen, which I needed that. So I share these stories because they're part of how I've opened to the support of the ancestors over the years. And Dan Brown, a teacher in the Tibetan tradition who came here and led a number of retreats over the years, and Hogan and Dan became pretty good friends. And Hogan did a lot of retreats with him outside of the monastery, but whenever Hogan gets interested in a teacher, he invites them to teach here. So he did that maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. And Dan Brown is the one who taught us about the gift waves of influence, that you can open to the qualities of the lineage. And for some of you, you might not have that much of a connection to the Zen teachers yet, or the Zen lineage. And that's okay. You can open to the support of personal ancestors or personal teachers, family, guides, people in your life who have supported you, or people even that you haven't met who have inspired you throughout your life. And you can ask for help with a specific aspect of practice or just for their blessings. And when Dan Brown taught us this practice, he said like a specific aspect that we might ask for, or specific help we might ask for, could be one of the paramitas, or the four immeasurables, or factors of awakening. So qualities that we might be working on cultivating in our Dharma practice. So that might be concentration or wisdom, patience. These are all paramitas. Loving kindness, ease, joy, faith, trust, determination, energy, calm, equanimity, or spaciousness, or some other quality that you are working on cultivating in your practice. So if you're really working with wanting to deepen concentration, you might connect with the lineage. We have a lineage that values concentration. Or you might connect to somebody that you know who has that quality, and ask for their help. And that's the practice. It's simply to open to their help. And perhaps imagining ways that the ancestor embodies the qualities you are cultivating. So you get like a little somatic imprint of what that might feel like to embody that quality. And then let go. Return to your practice. Chosen would often say that the ancestors are always ready to help us in our zazen, in our practice. We just need to be humble enough to ask. That can be the biggest barrier for a lot of American students. She would say that's their vow. They're seasoned in the Bodhisattva way. That's what they took, this vow for life, for many lives. And they're here to aid in the awakening of all beings, and that includes us. As practitioners, we're part of their vow. We're part of this family of awakening. Dogen Zenji has this quote, I can't remember the fascicle it's from. Your father and mother are temporarily close to you in birth and death, but the practitioners in this assembly are your companions on the path of awakening for all time. So in it, he's saying in this particular life, we have particular karmic connections with people, our parents, our family of origin. But in the cosmic view of our lives as a life or lives as of awakening, we have deep aspirational connections with all those who are on the path. And this very well may be all beings. I think it can be just interesting to connect to that. There's this lineage of ancestors who've taken a vow to help you. Lean into their support. I think this practice of opening to the help of the ancestors can be a kind of medicine for those of us who were raised in a really individualistic kind of culture. There's a narrative in our culture of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Don't ask for help. Do it yourself. And we can be very focused on our own individual experience, as a society. And this mentality can bleed into our Zazen and Sesshin practice, where we're constantly comparing ourselves to some ideal, or we get really hyper fixated on our own mind state. Am I calm? Oh, I just had a thought, not calm. And we're just constantly checking and assessing and comparing ourselves to others when we have no idea what is happening in anybody else's Zazen, but we think we do. And so this practice of opening to the ancestors perhaps helps us connect to a sense of togetherness that is so much bigger than our own assessment of our practice. And so much more mysterious than anything the comparing self-conscious mind can even keep track of. So that's one of my prayers as we share this sesshin together, that the heart, mind, light of the ancestors continues to be intimately transmitted through our practice. Well, like I said, when I first started practicing Zen, I didn't really know anything about the ancestors. It was just through the years of sesshin and monastic practice, listening to teishos, finding books in the library, finding poetry, listening to the chants, reading the koans, that I started to learn some of their stories. And through hearing and saying their names every morning. So every morning during service, we're chanting the names of the ancestors. We're invoking the lineage. And many of the names you might not know. But slowly, sometimes one of them just keeps rolling in your heart or on your tongue. Like, oh, who is that? Ryonen Genso. Who is that Ratnavati? And then you might hear a story about them or read a koan about them. So I want to share a story of Kakuzan Shido. Kakuzan Shido is in our women's lineage. We chanted her name yesterday. And I'm going to read from the same book that Gensho read from. This was the only book, or one of the only books, when I started practicing about the women ancestors. Now there are many. So it's amazing, just in the last 15 or so years, so much more research and scholarship and authorship has gone into uncovering and telling the women ancestor stories. But this is by Jiko Tisdale, who is a Dharma teacher at Dharma Rain. So she's in Portland. She's a fantastic author as well. So she found as much as she could from the textual stories of the women ancestors, and then she used her creative liberties to give them more life, to breathe some life into their stories. So it's part fiction, part based in reality, as much as we know of these people. So Kakuzan Shido was raised in the samurai class in Japan in the 13th century. And the story goes, at age 10, she was married to her older cousin. And I don't know if it was first cousin. I hope not. Maybe we could think it was third or fourth cousin. And she was part of this famous samurai family at the time. And so after she was married, she was taught the samurai ways. And it said she always carried a knife with her. When her husband was 33, and he was a little older than she was, he passed away due to an illness. And before her husband had died, Kakuzan Shido and her husband had a monastery built, and it was called Engakuji. And they were great patrons of Buddhism. And he actually went to the monastery after he fell ill, and they thought that maybe if he would practice, he would heal. It didn't work, and maybe it did on some level, but he still passed away. So she loses her husband, and then she loses the rest of her family a year later in an act of violence. Most of her family is killed. So at that point, having lost mostly everything, all that was dear to her, all the relationships that were dear to her, she used some of her family's money and decided to build a nunnery across the street from Engakuji. So Engakuji was a Rinzai monastery, and we're still in the era where it was a training monastery for men, and being a woman, she wasn't allowed to live there, but she was allowed to train there. So she had this nunnery built, and then she would walk across the street, and she trained at Engakuji. And she must have been a dedicated student. We can say these details of she lost her husband to illness, her whole family was killed. But those are pretty big details for a human heart. So somebody who really knew loss, maybe loss like we can't even imagine it. Some of you may have a taste of that kind of loss. And she was a devoted student, devoted to this path of awakening. And after a number of years of training, the abbot at Engakuji gave her Dharma transmission, Inka, which is, again, a big deal at the time. So what that meant was she could be the abbess of the nunnery and train her own students, which is what she did. The nunnery was called Tokeiji. And there's so much mystery shrouding this person, Kakuzan Shido. She's a character. So somehow she came to have a giant mirror in the shrine room at the monastery. And where the mirror came from is shrouded in mystery. Some stories say that when Engakuji, the monastery that she helped patron, that her and her husband helped patron, when they were breaking ground for that monastery, there was a giant mirror that was discovered underground. And it was excavated and disappeared for a while until Tokeiji was built, and then it ended up there. I don't know. Others say there was this great mirror on a Shinto shrine that honored the nun Shogun, who had a premonitory vision that ended up saving part of Japan in an attack. And there was apparently a giant mirror that was constructed on that shrine. And apparently that mirror disappeared around the same time that Tokeiji got their mirror. So, don't know where it came from. Both of those stories are very interesting, though. But she got this mirror, this giant mirror, in their shrine hall. And that's where I'll start reading, because she started practicing with this mirror. She looked at the mirror every day as she walked to and from the meditation hall. And then one day, she stopped and sat right in front of it. After that, she moved her cushion into the mirror hall and did all of her meditation there. It was curious. She had done a lot of Zazen. She had Dharma transmission and deep understanding, and had at times felt as though everything was clear all the way through, clear to the bottom. But in front of the mirror, her mind kept flitting, resting and flitting away like a moth in the garden, like the sparrow whose head is never still. She looked in the mirror and saw what? Nothing. Everything. Her own face and body. She looked in the mirror and noticed her eyes flitting and her hands trembling, her posture shifting every few moments. She looked in the mirror and tried to be still, to hold the gaze of her own eyes perfectly still, unmoving like a statue. She tried to be like a picture. She tried to sit like a tree, like a rock, like a dream. She knew how to hold herself still and bright and relaxed and upright and serene and strong all at once. She knew how, but in front of the mirror, it was very difficult. Finally, with eyes open and seeing herself, she could hold herself utterly still and soft just for a moment. After that, her mind began to relax and move less, flit less often and less quickly. She began to see through the reflection, through the skin and the eyes and the face and the reflection, to see nothing, empty, full. The mirror was clear, clear as water, clear as air, clear as the sky, clear as the truth. No dust could alight. Shido wrote this poem to express her understanding. If the mind never rests on a single thing, nothing can be clouded. No need to speak of polishing. So mirror. Mirror is a powerful analogy for our practice. Mirror and its reflections. Another image of intimacy. For when we gaze into a mirror, we see ourselves. We see our reflection. And usually the mind comments, judges perhaps, feelings arise, longings, we look away. But what does the mirror do? What does the mirror do when we stand in front of the mirror, when we face the mirror directly? The mirror just reflects, allows. Whatever comes in front of the mirror is held in the steady, non-judgmental space of the mirror's clarity. Any person, any shape, any wall, room, light or dark, the mirror doesn't complain, doesn't judge, just reflects. Dust just reflects. Our awareness is like the mirror. Whatever arises, thoughts, feelings, emotions, back pain, worry, any kind of drama, the millions of knots we can tie ourselves up in through a single thought. The mirror just allows, awareness just allows. In this deeply intimate way, all is held, all is felt. even the resistance to feeling, even the tension, even the nightmarish thought or the subtlest distraction. All sound, breath, feeling, sensation. It all appears in our mirror mind. At the moment of appearing, it is inseparable from the mirror, from mirror mind. It's that intimate. Right now, the sound of the rain, the bird, appearing in your mirror mind. Inseparable. Often we forget about the mirror when we gaze into it. Like Shido did. We get lost in appearances, we get lost in our judgments, in our memories. But when we look, when we steady our gaze, when we see through the reflections into the mirror itself, it's clear, spacious, allowing everything, unconditional love. Our minds, our awareness is like a mirror. We can practice this. Taking the backward step into awareness, immersing deeply in breath or sound, and simply allowing, not provoking thoughts or pushing them away. Not provoking thoughts or pushing them away. Not feeding them. Hongzhi calls this non-interference, mirror mind. Can I be with this experience just like a mirror would? What's beautiful about this story of Kakuzan Shido is she ended up installing the mirror in the zendo. Imagine that. And anyone who came to train there got to practice sitting in front of the mirror. And Tokeiji actually also was known as divorce temple. And women who wanted to get a divorce could, as long as they got a shoe on the monastery grounds, they were accepted and they were safe. So if they were, fleeing domestic violence or some situation, they could run to Tokeiji and throw a shoe. There's stories of this. And then they were safe. They were able to come in and practice there. And they had this giant mirror in their meditation hall, and anyone who came would get to sit in front of the mirror. And they created their own form of a breakthrough koan with the mirror. The koan, it's a little clunky, but it is, where is a single feeling, a single thought in the mirror image at which I gaze? Where is a single feeling, a single thought in the mirror image at which I gaze? And then nuns would, when they had insight into that koan, they would write a poem of insight. And the poems of the abbesses, not everybody's poem, but the poems of the abbesses, and there were 8 generations of abbesses, became part of the koan tradition that was specific to that temple. Which is just a really cool part of the ancestor line at this particular temple. When I first heard this story, a few weeks later, I ended up inheriting a mirror. Somebody died at the place I was working. I was working at the Amber in Klatskanai, and I got her mirror. So I would do this in the women's dorm. I set up my mirror and I would sit and just start gazing through my reflection into the mirror itself. And that helped me learn mirror mind. Naked, open, silent mind. So this analogy of mind like a mirror is profound. Somebody early on in my practice read this story during a sesshin and then instructed us to sit like a mirror. Sit like a mirror. It's an invitation to simplify. So it doesn't mean you change your practice, but what is it like to sit as a mirror, breathing or listening? Not adding on anything extra, just reflecting what's here. And just like a mirror, whatever's here is intimately you for that moment. Oh, trust the naked, silent, open space of mind. Trust your own mirror awareness. Nothing extra needed. This is the path of intimacy. This is how we receive and transmit the light of the ancestors.
Thank you for listening to the Zen Community of Oregon podcast, and thank you for your practice. New episodes air every week. Please consider making a donation at zendust.org. Your support supports us.